What is the true cost of survival? And what if attaining power is the only way that you can guarantee your survival? We have this really interesting moment with Agatha Harkness, a recent addition to the Marvel MCU since WandaVision. And today we are going to look at her marvelous arc through the Divisive Immortal villain. All right, Agatha Harkness. What do we know? It's time to look for our inner villains. Agatha Harkness and her role in WandaVision is a very interesting one. If you go back and look at the Eternal Child and how we look at Wanda Maximoff, you will see that Agatha Harkness is actually an instigator of change in WandaVision. Wanda is her own villain. She doesn't need anybody else. It's only at the very end do we actually see Agatha Harkness come out as a villain who's trying to get a hold of the Darkhold. What we recognize is that the whole time, though, Agatha Harkness is actually showing us a very predictable arc, and she's actually moving beautifully through it. The interesting thing is that when we move from WandaVision, in which we see her being completely banished by Wanda as Wanda comes into a better version of herself in that arc, we see that we start the beginning of Agatha all along from her worst version of herself, right? She's completely dissociated, everything is going not the way that she expects, and she doesn't have any powers. And the entire story is the acquisition of her power and how she chooses to use it differently, which is why it is such a brilliant arc of a villain and the redemption of a villain. Of course, she may still be a villain, as we recognize. She may not even show up in a lot of Marvel properties after this, but let's look at the Divisive Immortal arc that Agatha moves beautifully along throughout her appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Divisive Immortal archetype. Okay, so any character that moves through an arc is likely, when they're going to show up in their worst form, is going to show up as the Divisive Immortal. The Divisive Immortal is the representation of the Six and the Enneagram, which is also known as the Loyal Skeptic, and also the representation of the Splenic Center in human design. The Splenic Center and the Six are both heavily concentrated on this idea of safety. When you have an undefined Splenic Center, and when you are in your worst part of your Six, you are afraid that the world is not safe and the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath you. You're also extremely sensitive to the feelings and physicality and physical ailments of other people. You also may have a very interesting take on time, hence the immortal part of this title. So, here are the six villains as they move through from the worst villain all the way out to the legend, which is the most redemptive quality of this particular villain. First, we have the Divisive Immortal. The Divisive Immortal can properly be seen in Agatha Harkness, but it can also be seen in Dracula and in Voldemort. Voldemort, to me, is one of the better representations of this, because what we see is Voldemort is entirely convinced that he does not want to die. And he is willing to do anything in order to be able to do that. That means that he is willing to sacrifice anything to ensure his own life, whether that's in making Horcruxes or whether that's in basically creating an entire war with wizards just so that he can be immortal. He is the worst form of the Divisive Immortal. And what we also recognize is that Harry Potter also reflects this same, but he chooses to go a different path with this particular villain arc. And so we look at Voldemort as the example of this. The next one, which is the successful antagonist, is the catastrophist. Okay, who has ever met somebody who actually always wanted to just remind you of how dangerous something was? Maybe it's a grandparent with a grandkid being like, oh my gosh, you're gonna bust your face open. Or maybe you're gonna do this. Or I'm just letting you know that there's a really high chance that you're gonna get hurt in this case. That is a catastrophist. The thing is that being very sensitive to what happens in the world and how it happens, it makes it so that you're hyper aware and hyper vigilant of how safe you and your loved ones are at any given time. And so if you choose to share that all the time in order to be able to place fear inside people you know, you may be a catastrophist. You may be sitting on this arc because fundamentally you recognize that you are mortal and you are in denial about that. You're trying to stop everybody you know from going away. You're extremely loyal to the people you love, and you want to make sure that they are going to hang around, so you become the catastrophist. The wounded child of this arc is the outcast. Voldemort again. An orphan who didn't belong, who was a wizard who wasn't even able to actually feel like he could belong in any situation before he actually went to Hogwarts. Same with Harry. Also an outcast, right? An outcast in the Dursley family, an outcast at school. He didn't belong in any situation. The outcast is a representation of the fact that this person feels that they fundamentally maybe don't belong in the world. They may look at the people around them and they may say, I don't understand why you guys aren't more scared to be human. In a very, very simple way, when we don't have connections, when we don't have a loving environment that we're growing up in, when we don't have a safe environment that we're growing up in, we have a tendency to feel as if the world is not a safe place and thus we must do something about it. And so that is why the wounded child in this arc, all the arcs have a wounded child and a successful antagonist and a pinnacle villain. The wounded child is the outcast. The next on this is the covert form of this villain, which is the follower or the faithful. The faithful is a representation of someone who wants to feel like they fit in a group. They felt like an outcast before, and now they're like, I'm going to join a group and I'm going to be the best member of that group there is, and it's going to make me safe, and the people around here are going to care and make me safe. The reality is that is not the case. The covert form of this has usually found some sort of guru, teacher, cult leader, something like that in its worst form to follow, to be totally loyal to give up all of their autonomy and decision making in order to be able to actually adhere to whatever they're saying just so that they can feel safe. That person may not actually, they may be sacrificed in that process, but at least they followed something and at least they feel that they are in the right when it comes to this. So where do we go? We have a number of different things that are all surrounding this idea of being afraid of death and having a difficulty with being human and wanting to create human connection and coming up with really awful strategies sometimes for creating human connection and creating a sense of safety. So what do? We say, okay, the hero of this arc is the mortal. The hero of this arc embraces their mortality. They recognize and they go into their fear of death, and they recognize that there is literally nothing, or there's no sacrificing of another person. There's nothing that is worth the pain that you could cause, that is worth immortality. There's nothing that anyone can do that is okay to do to somebody else in order to be able to take power from other people, in order to be able to feel safe, in order to feel immortal. And so what we recognize with this one in particular is that we haven't talked about the divisive aspect of the divisive immortal. The divisiveness is this idea that you are alive and they are dead, or if you're the faithful, I'm in my group and you're not in my group. If you are the worst pinnacle villain in this, you are saying they're constantly trying to divide in order to regain power, in order to be able to have power, in order to become immortal. That's effectively the strategy. And the mortal not only has to face death, but also has to unify aspects of themselves. And as we go into the legendary part of this, the legend of this particular arc is the healer, because the healer has to deal with mortality, and then it also has to embrace the unity of the reality of whatever is going on, in the sense of a healer sees somebody as already healed, right? So for me, I'm an energy healer. When I do energy healing, I see somebody as already healed, but I also acknowledge the parts of them that are very not well or diseased, and I have to combine the two, and that's how I heal. We're integrating the thing that is seemingly wrong with this aspect of immortality. We're unifying as healers. And so that is the legend of this particular arc. Coming into Agatha Harkness and how it is that she reflects this particular villain. In her worst form, Agatha is only loyal to her own power and her own immortality. And she is willing to suck the life and the power from so many people who she should be unified with, so many other witches, and she's willing to pull them in and basically create a promise of the road, a promise of this experience in order to be able to be the succubus that she is and effectively take the energy and life from all of these witches. These are the people who she should be the most aligned with. But for her, power is immortality, and anything is worth that. She kills her coven. She kills multiple covens, many hundreds of covens over the years in order to be able to be alive in the current day that she is. And so her quest for power is ultimately a quest for immortality. And the way that she does it is that she divides and conquers. She divides a small group of witches, she takes them away, and she's able to actually gain the power from them. The key quote that we see as the pinnacle villain is, "I didn't break your rules. They simply bent to my power."
Not break your rules. They simply bent to my power.
Recognizing that we are not, she's like, oh, I didn't break any rules. This was just my power, and this is my right to be able to take this power, because why else you were the ones who were dumb enough to follow me. Therefore, I can do anything that I want to you. Voldemort does something similar, if you can see that, when he does that to all the other pureblood followers of him. He's willing to sacrifice and do awful things to them, and he's like, well, I'm more powerful than you, therefore I'm allowed to do it. Agatha is willing to sacrifice herself in order to be able to actually live. It's very different from Wanda as the eternal child, who is always seeking love and belonging. Agatha does not care about belonging. She cares about immortality and taking power from others. That's how ultimately we see that for her, connection doesn't solve anything other than a quest for power, right? Or a quest for safety, right? And so we recognize that all of the villains have different ways of why they choose to connect or not connect with other individuals. This is an example of the 2, the 4, the 6, and the 8 in the Enneagram, or the vengeful martyr, the eternal child, the divisive immortal, and then the righteous bully. All of them are very fear-based. They choose to actually connect with other people because of the fact that they are afraid of what will happen if they don't. If they'll die, they won't be loved, they won't be able to survive. So much of this is endemic about fear and survival. And because of that, all 4 of them have different methods for being able to convince. The vengeful martyr has the codependent strategy. The eternal child is constantly acting as if they need help. They're falling into the child role. The divisive immortal is trying to consolidate power by effectively dividing people and pulling on people's loyalty. And then the righteous bully is using the opinions and the dogma that they believe in order to, again, get followers, but then be able to do whatever they want, no matter what that is. So a very interesting take on how this moves through. So now we move on to the next role with Agatha, the successful antagonist, the catastrophist. She thrives on creating fear. Chaos, power imbalance, anything Wanda might do.
The name's Agatha Harkness. Lovely to finally meet you, dear.
One of the key things that happens as Agatha is moving through her particular arc is that she spends a long time as the pinnacle villain, hundreds of years as the pinnacle villain, ever since she takes all the power from her coven, and then she keeps creating covens and taking power from them. She moves into the successful antagonist, the catastrophist, because she is trying to manipulate Wanda into giving up whatever power Wanda has, because Agatha says, but I know how to do it better. I'm going to instill fear in you that you don't know how to use this power, and I'm just going to do it so much better. Just hand it over to me. I'm going to be that much better, and God knows what's going to happen if you do it. Being a very catastrophic sort of way of seeing things.
Give me your power, and I will correct the flaws in your original spell.
So why don't you surrender your magic to someone who knows what to do with it?
She feeds into Wanda's self-doubt about herself, trying to get Wanda to join with her to give her the power of the Darkhold or the power of the Scarlet Witch. And she says, your problem is that you think that you are the only one with power. Agatha obviously has a lot of power at this case. And when we see her moving into the position of not having any power, that's when everything starts to shift around for her. And she moves out of these 2 successful antagonists and the pinnacle villain.
Okie dokie, artichoke.
So if we go the wounded child, which is the outcast, Agatha never belonged. Her particular power of being a succubus and being able to take the energy of others meant that she needed to have a strategy that basically said, I need to get people angry because no one's going to voluntarily give me their power. So I have to create a strategy that makes it so that I am actually prompting people to get angry at me and to give their power to me. Obviously, using the road and using all the stories of the road and the falsehoods behind it allowed her to create that strategy so she could take on more power.
We do need a coven to access the road. Even the most down and out witches, when in close proximity with each other, bring out a magical spark.
But as we see with her in Salem in those early days, if we see the scene where Agatha is in the road and she's having to actually deal with the Ouija board and deal with what her mother says, her mother is angry about what Agatha did, but her mother is also rejecting her outright.
Why do you hate me still?
I ought to have killed you the moment you left my body.
In so many different ways, we see that Agatha's natural power has made her an outcast. She says, I can be good. But of course, she was never taught or given the ability to belong to any group that would actually include her. Whether that's the nature of her power or whether that's the nature of her first coven, it's hard to say. And ultimately, her magic made her different. She feels that means that she was never supposed to belong to a coven because naturally she was always going to take the energy from all the other witches around her. And yet maybe there's a different way for her to look at things. Or maybe, as we see in her particular arc, she moves all the way through and has to move through mortality in order to actually become the thing that she really can be in this case. So, going and moving forward, her power makes her too powerful, so she has to be an outcast. That then propels her to become the pinnacle villain that we see. One of the quotes that Agatha says in the middle of WandaVision at the end is she says, "There are always torches and pitchforks for ladies like us, Wanda." That is the catastrophist in a nutshell.
There will always be torches and pitchforks for ladies like us, Wanda.
And so recognizing, okay, so Agatha as the follower is one in which she is effectively trying to drum up people who are going to follow her. Either she becomes the cult leader or she becomes one of the followers. In her case, she kind of stays as the cult leader. You could probably say that she maybe becomes the follower when it suits her. So when she becomes a member of the road and she's kind of always like, I'm just not going to say anything. I kind of know what's going on here. I suspect what's going on here, but I'm just going to lay low and I'm not going to say anything at all. We see that she manipulates others into following her, which puts her into the Divisive Immortal, the leader of the cult. And then she's always encouraging people to be the follower for her. So she doesn't show up as much as in the follower, other than when she chooses to just go along with the flow, despite the fact that she actually knows what's going on better than anybody else. So how do we move through to the mortal view of Wanda? The only way out is that Wanda has to accept her death. She recognizes that she has to actually atone for everything that has happened to her and everything that she has done. The Salem 8 have been chasing everybody throughout Agatha all along the entire time. And when she encounters Billy Maximoff, she recognizes that ultimately she needs to make a choice different than she ever has before. And that choice means that she needs to die. And so we see that there is a huge, huge difference in the arc that Agatha has happened all along. So if we even recognize the title, Agatha All Along, we can say, oh my gosh, can you believe that Agatha is the one who's actually doing this arc? Every single person who goes on the road with Agatha has their own growing to do. They each represent a different villain on the arc. We're looking at Agatha in this particular case. And it's interesting because in many ways, Agatha needs to become a part of a coven. She needs to become a follower in order to be able to actually move through her arc. Her power makes it so that she may never belong to a coven. But without her and without every other person in this group, she has to be a follower. She has to belong, and she actually has to be a part of a group, which is how we see her come through her arc as the follower, as a member of the coven, even if every single person is dying or leaving. And so recognizing that she ultimately had to accept a coven and accept the help that she was going to have from them, and she was ultimately going to be able to, use the seed to create to actually grow the garden and actually pull in different types of magic. We recognize that she had to become friends with death, literally become friends with the original Green Witch in order to be able to move through her arc.
What if we just call it truce? Just, I don't know.
That's the fascinating part about this, right? You can apply this arc to anything, but in this particular case, Agatha actually has to make friends with death. She has to make friends with Rio. She has to be able to use the tiny seed that has been in her locket the entire time to be able to grow something. And in doing that, she becomes friends with death in a very different way. And that means that she has to atone. And so we see her as she comes into the mortal, she has to make a choice. She has to either atone for what she's done and fulfill the commitments that she's made to Rio, or she sacrifices Billy. And we see in this moment that this is when she makes her true move into the hero. As she becomes the mortal, she embraces the fact that she will die or that she needs to die. And she does. And so then she's able to move into the legend. She's able to move into the legend because she's able to actually become the healer. And she's able to help Billy heal. She is moving into a guide position that is there, that is present to be able to actually help Billy move through his arc as it will come forward in the future MCU things, possibly in the Young Marvels, we'll see, or possibly in the Young Avengers. And so Agatha moves out of her villain move. Maybe. She may be a different type of healer. We recognize that there are a lot of different types of healer, just as there are a lot of different types of witches. There are some witches who are green witches, who are potions witches, as you say there. There are hedge witches. There are all sorts of different witches, and there are all sorts of different healers. Some people are light healers. Some people are dark healers. Some people are using all things under the sun in order to be able to heal, which is effectively, again, the ability to guide a person from a place of imbalance and disease into a place of wholeness again. People have many different ways of doing it. I do it by effectively looking at them in their most perfect form and trying to draw them back, making that aspect stronger. Other people have different ways, and Agatha will have a different way, whether we see her in the Young Avengers or whether we see her anywhere else. So let's stay tuned to see how the Divisive Immortal will show up again and see where she goes as the healer, or if she wants to go all the way back to the beginning again. We'll see. If you like this, please let me know. Please leave comments below. Argue. I love to hear any of your feedback. It's fantastic. And we are going to be doing Glinda and Elphaba in the first part of their arc for the next video. I hope y'all enjoy it. And please like, subscribe, and do everything you can. It helps so much to get the content out. So thank you.